if I lose the weight, if I get my ideal body, then I'm going to be happy. Then I'm going to be deserving and worthy of a romantic partner. Then I'm going to be, in the mindset to achieve my goals. I'm going to be confident. I'm going to love myself. But I was not willing or even able to give that to myself at the point that I was at in the body that I was living in at that moment. Welcome to Well with Jesus, where we do wellness Jesus way. This podcast is all about empowering you to build a wellness routine that honors God and makes you feel your best. Each week, I'll share practical tips and biblical principles to help you create a sustainable routine without the overwhelm, guilt, and spiritual confusion of many wellness trends. If that resonates with you, dear friend, I'd love for you to join me weekly. Don't forget to rate and review the show so more women can find us. Hello, dear friend, and welcome to another episode of the Well with Jesus podcast. So I am really excited for what I'm going to be talking about today, but before we get into that, I just wanted to encourage you, if you have been enjoying the show, to leave a 5-star rating and a review of the show on the podcast app that you are listening from. So maybe that's Apple Podcasts, maybe that's Spotify, or whatever you're using to listen to this episode today. And I have really enjoyed engaging with you guys on social media, seeing your feedback on the episodes. That is so encouraging and means so much to me that I can't really put into words. But in order for the show to grow, to reach more people outside of the people who have been listening so far, I need those reviews and ratings on the podcast apps because that's how the algorithms of these apps work. That is how the show will get pushed out to more people. So I'm just kindly requesting your partnership in that if you really believe in the show and what it has to offer, would you help me out to get it out to more people by leaving a rating, 5-star rating, and a review. So now that that's done, I will get into the content of today's episode. Today, I thought it would be great to share about my body image journey, the struggles that I have gone through, and my recovery journey, and then also just share some tips that I have learned along the way that can be helpful for you to recover, have a more positive body image if this is something that you have been struggling with. And I think that body image is something so important to speak about. I don't think that it ever becomes irrelevant, just because of the nature of the society that we live in that places so much value on women's aesthetics and pressurizes us so much to conform to a specific type of body ideal. Over time, we've seen a couple of trends go in and out with the ideal body for a woman. But no matter what the trend is, there's still that outward pressure that can be internalized that then influences how we relate with our own bodies, and often it results in us developing insecurities that just cause us to have negative body image. So that is kind of like a mental health thing, it can result in disordered eating, it can result in just poor self-esteem and self-worth. And so in terms of our holistic wellness, working on having a positive body image, a positive relationship with your body is something that is really important to focus on from a mental health perspective. And then as an integrative nutrition health coach, I am acutely aware of the fact that what goes on in the mind doesn't just stay there. The mind and the body are connected through various pathways. And so if you are struggling with your body image, that can also then have an effect on your physical health if it gets, out of hand. So that is really the heart behind me sharing my story and then also encouraging you in this area if this is an encouragement that you need. So I'm going to kick off by just sharing a bit about my journey, and then we will go into the more tips and practical side of things. So let's get into it. So I remember when I was around 11, 12, kind of in that pre-puberty stage of my life, I started to become really aware of my body, how my body looks, and the fact that my body does not look the way that I have been conditioned that it should look. I think at the time in my preteens and my early teens, I was reading a really popular girls magazine at the time that's since been discontinued. It was called 17 magazine. And in this magazine, the girls were the way that girls typically tend to be in magazines, slim. And I just remember like in each not in each episode, in each magazine edition or issue, there would be obviously a lot of pictures of the girls in bikinis and stuff like that. And that just started to condition me around what kind of a body is valued for a girl of my age, a girl in this season of life that I am in. And comparing myself with those girls, I was like, I don't look like this. And so that was the beginning of me becoming aware of my body as an object to be looked upon, not only by myself, but also by other people. And then also the fact that it did not look the way that the prevailing aesthetic looks. At that point in time, I started to become insecure about, in particular, my legs. If you guys remember, maybe if you're around the same age as me, I'm 27. At that time in like early teens vibes, there was this term thunder thighs. I don't know if it's still a thing, but I felt like I had thunder thighs. And that was just the beginning of like my body insecurity. I also didn't have a flat stomach, and going to pool parties as a young girl, I felt insecure around the other girls, around the boys, because that's also a time of your life where you're becoming aware of boys. You know, you want male attention, you want boys to find you attractive and stuff. And so going to these pool parties, I just felt like insecure to wear a swimming costume because of the fact that I didn't look the way a lot of the girls around me also looked. So it wasn't just the girls in the magazines that I had to compare myself against. There was also girls at school who were considerably slimmer than I was, because going to predominantly white schools throughout my life, I was surrounded by mainly white girls. And for the most part, you know, in youth, the white girls were really quite slim and I was not really quite slim, you know? So that was something that I also had to compare myself against that played into me developing these body insecurities. And so going from primary school into high school, things kind of developed and got even worse. And I remember towards the end of high school, I was at this point at an all-girls school, and I guess my attempts to slim down really started to ramp up at this point. Before, it was more just like, I'm aware that I don't really look how I feel I'm supposed to, but I wasn't necessarily trying to do anything to change it. You know, it was just existing in this awkward discomfort, but I wasn't doing anything about it. But when I got to late high school, I think that's when I started to become more aware of the fact that you, to an extent, can influence your body, how it looks, through what you eat and whether or not you exercise. And if you maybe went to a girls' school, you would relate and know that there's kind of a lot of preoccupation around body aesthetic, body image when you're surrounded by that many girls. And I even remember there were a couple of girls in my grade who were struggling with eating disorders and who had to be like monitored by teachers because of their eating disorders. So that was kind of like the environment that I was in at the end of high school. And I was a boarder, and we had created a community of girls who would meet together in the afternoon. We'd meet at the dance studio and we would work out together, which honestly was really fun. Like, I wouldn't even say that there was anything red flaggy about that, but it was more so about, like, I think our individual mindsets. When we came together, it was like lots of fun, really empowering. It's so good to work on your health, and it's really fun to do that around other people. But individually, I definitely had at that point really started internalizing diet culture, and it was becoming unhealthy. So I remember once for dinner, I convinced myself that eating a couple of cubes of pumpkin was enough for me. And I literally believed that night that I was full from just eating that. And fortunately, I had a friend who was like really close to me, and she saw the fact that I literally didn't eat and was like, girl, no. So that's not something that I continued to do, thank God. Also, another thing that I did was I went vegetarian when I was at boarding school because I felt that we were eating so much meat and that was like not contributing to me becoming thin because meat has so much fat and stuff. And so I just can't be eating it all the time. And so I went vegetarian, and after a couple of weeks or a couple of months, I became iron deficient. Like I was always exhausted. Eventually, I had to go and get that checked out. And it turned out that I had an iron deficiency, and that was because I was not eating properly for the food that was available to me at that time because I couldn't control what I ate. I couldn't substitute chicken with beans. I just didn't eat any protein basically. So, yeah, that was end of high school, and then I would say that things just got even worse when I went to university because when I got to varsity was when I not only, I think, really, really got empowered with knowledge about health and exercise and nutrition, but I also, at that point, was like really leaning into Instagram. I feel like that's when that became a big thing in my life. And I was using Instagram to document my weight loss journey, but also to get inspiration from other people on Instagram who were going through a similar journey. And that became extremely toxic for me. It became something that I really clung to. It became something that was like aspirational for me, but in an unhealthy way where I was constantly exposing myself to these images of women who had these what I thought were amazing before after transformations, and I was feeding myself with that visual information so often that I bought into that completely, and that is what I believed also would happen for me. And I think a thing that I subconsciously developed was to identify the woman in the before as being like unhappy and not the best version of herself, and then the woman in the after being the most self-actualized version of herself, and that I projected onto myself as well. So in my university weight loss journey, I had this mindset of like, I'm not happy right now because I'm not at my ideal body, and I'm going to put in everything. I'm going to wake up early in the morning, go to the gym 6 times a week, work out so intensely. I'm going to eat not enough for what I need at this point in time. And I'm going to stay committed to that because if I lose the weight, if I get my ideal body, then I'm going to be happy. Then I'm going to be deserving and worthy of a romantic partner. Then I'm going to be, in the mindset to achieve my goals. I'm going to be confident. I'm going to love myself. But I was not willing or even able to give that to myself at the point that I was at in the body that I was living in at that moment. And so, yeah, my body image story kind of got to a peak, or rather not my body image, but my body dissatisfaction story really got to a peak in university. Like I really hated my body. And that was because of just what I was exposing myself to on Instagram and the mindset that developed in me, that not having your ideal body means that you're actually not worthy of basically anything that you want in life. And that obviously was not a conscious process. It happened subconsciously. But I got to a point where I really had very low self-worth. I did not consider myself deserving, really, or worthy of the things that really anyone deserves. You know what I mean? Like, as a base level, we all deserve to be happy, to have love, to feel confident in yourself no matter how your body looks. Like, those things should not be attached at all to how your body looks. So I eventually got to a point where feeling so unhappy in my body just became too much because it was controlling my life. A lot of how I spent my time was dictated by the fact that I was on this journey to lose weight. I was constantly thinking about what I was eating or what I wasn't eating. I was constantly like looking forward to the weekend so I could have a cheat meal. I was constantly scheduling my life around going to the gym. And if I didn't go to the gym, it was kind of like a catastrophe, because if I miss one session at the gym, I'm not gonna lose weight, or I'm gonna gain weight. I had this like constant underlying fear of fatness, which is totally toxic and totally burdensome, extremely heavy. So I had this heavy weight on my shoulders all the time, and I just didn't want that anymore. But I also still wanted to lose weight and have all of these things that I was delaying until I could lose the weight and be in the perfect body. So anyway, one of the days, just in a normal day, I was in the mall at Cavendish Mall, and Exclusive Books was having a sale. And so I went to the sale, I checked out the books, and I came across this one book called Fat is a Feminist Issue. And that was such an incredible discovery for me. Reading that book really was the beginning of my body image healing journey. So the author of that book, she is an expert in helping women recover from disordered eating and body image issues. And so in her book, she kind of speaks about like the societal landscape that we find ourselves in that contributes to so many women being unhappy with their bodies and going on to develop unhealthy eating behaviors because of being unhappy in their bodies. She also speaks about unhealthy relationship with food, not only from body dissatisfaction, for example. She talks about having an unhealthy relationship with food, for example, compulsive eating, which is when you just find yourself just eating. Like you can't stop yourself, or you don't always know why you eat, but you just eat, right? And she speaks about that as a form of like self-soothing, but also as a form of control, when sometimes women find themselves in their lives where they feel so out of control because of, I don't want to say patriarchy, but I think that's kind of like what she was saying in the book, patriarchy, and how that seeps into daily life, and women just end up feeling out of control, and sometimes they take that out on food, and that results in compulsive eating. So that was one of the things that she spoke about. But the thing that really was relevant to me was the aspect of having an unhealthy relationship with food, because I have an unhealthy relationship with my body. So I also just want to add that as a Christian woman now, I am not a feminist. I know that is a highly controversial statement, but I'm not a feminist because I don't feel the need to have a man-made ideology that governs how I look at relations between man and woman. I believe that the Bible tells me how to relate with man and woman in terms of like gender relations, and I believe that the Bible speaks into my value and my worth as a woman. And so me, since becoming a believer, I don't need feminism anymore. But I just wanted to put that out there because I also don't want to seem like I'm advocating things that I don't believe in. So anyway, but at that time I read that book, and it was revolutionary for me given the frame of mind that I was in at that time. But even aside from the feminism aspect of that book, the things that she teaches, the strategies that she teaches in that book are really useful for people who are going through something like this. So I wouldn't like write it off because it is from a feminist viewpoint. I just wanted to give kind of like an overview of where I stand on also like feminism. But another book that I read a bit later on in my journey, a couple of years later, was a book called More Than a Body. Your Body is an Instrument, Not an Ornament. This is also another book that I can highly, highly recommend. It also gives tools, strategies, viewpoints that are helpful to just transform your mind, renew your mind about your body. And principally for me, like the key thing, I think the reason that I gravitated towards that book was the title, More Than a Body. That was a realization, one of the first realizations that I had that helped me to start overcoming my body image issues. The fact that I'm not a body, right? I am a soul in a body, but I am not a body. So I am more than a body. And that started to help me to detach my worth, my self-worth from how my body looks. So yeah, that's another book that I would recommend, More Than a Body. And the authors of this book, they're holders of PhDs in body image work, and they also have a nonprofit. So you can also look up the More Than a Body book, and then through that you can research the authors and then find their nonprofit. And on their nonprofit, they share resources that aid women to recover from body dissatisfaction. So anyway, I found this book when I was at Cavendish Mall. I read it. I started to do the exercises in the book, and things started to change for me. The weight that I felt around hating my body, feeling repulsed by my body at times, started to shed, and I started to confront the extremely negative and extremely valent negative emotions that I had towards my body. For example, one of the exercises that she recommends in the book is to do a mirror exercise. So essentially you stand in front of a mirror with basically no clothes, or if you feel uncomfortable with that, you can just wear your underwear. But you look at your body in the mirror. It's kind of like, in a way, like exposure therapy. You look at your body, you feel all of the emotions that you feel towards your body, expose yourself to them instead of running away from them, which is something that I also tried to do. I never really wanted to look at myself in the mirror because of how bad I felt every time I would look at my body in the mirror. And so that was one of the exercises that I did. And through confronting those feelings, getting used to actually acknowledging and holding space for those feelings, they started to become less powerful. So that's an example of one of the things that I did practically to work on recovering from the extremely negative body image that I had. And then going back to the whole thing of the realization that I had that I am more than a body, that was really important for me because it helped me to separate my self-worth from how I looked. That was a major, major issue for me. How I felt about my body was completely entangled with how I felt about myself. And I didn't realize that I was doing that until I started exposing myself to some of these resources. And so that is also, I guess, one of the first tips that I will share is to realize that you are not a body. Your worth is in who you are as a being, right? In one of the previous episodes that I spoke about, I think it was episode 4, I touched on the makeup of a human being, that we are soul, we are spirit, and we are body, right? So your body is just that part of you that allows you to be on earth. But when you die, you're not going to have a body anymore, but that doesn't mean that you're going to completely disappear and disintegrate. You're still going to have a soul, and you're still going to have a spirit. So realize the fact that you are not a body. Your worth is not in your body. Your value is not in your body, but it is in who you are, and that lies in your soul. That really helped me to just start valuing myself outside of my body. And even now, even today, when I think about myself and when I just reflect, I guess, on how I feel about myself, how my body looks does not factor into that self-evaluation. And so another concept or principle that really helped me in the past couple of years is body neutrality. So that means that essentially, no matter how you feel that your body looks, whether or not you like how your body looks, you have neutral feelings. So essentially, you try to not have overly positive feelings or overly negative feelings about your appearance. You try to just hold yourself in a neutral standpoint about how you look. And I'm actually having even a difficult time just articulating what that looks like in practice. But for me, I guess I'll speak on how that manifests for me. I am able to look at myself in the mirror now, and I'm able to look at myself without always having thoughts about how I look. So without always having thoughts of, oh, I really love how this part of my body looks, or, oh, I really don't like how that part looks. Sometimes I can just look at my body in the way that I can just go outside and look at a tree and not think about how it looks. So that is the best way that I'm able to explain body neutrality right now. It's just basically like trying to take out the emotions, essentially, out of how you engage with your body. And also, that's not to say that you can't have feelings about your body like it's bad to like how your body looks, or it's bad to on occasion maybe not like how your body looks. But essentially I would think of it as like a grounding mindset, something that you use to pull yourself back towards yourself in maybe those difficult moments. I also think of it as a protective mechanism of not becoming too in love or obsessed with how my body looks. Because if I'm able to become obsessed and in love, like in the sense of, I love my body is amazing, then on the flip side, I'm also able to get into a more depressed state about my body. And so for me personally, that's why body neutrality was so helpful for me, thinking that no matter what happens in my life, no matter what changes my body might go through in my life, I am committed to just staying in a neutral place, because that's a protective mechanism as well that I have to not get to a point of attaching my self-worth to my physical appearance again. And then the third principle that really helped me is body respect. So to respect your body for what it contributes to your life, the fact that through your body you are able to walk, you are able to work, you are able to have fun, you are able to add value to your own life, to other people's lives. You wouldn't be able to really do any of these things if you didn't have a body, you know? To appreciate the value that your body adds to your life. And then from that appreciation, to treat your body kindly, to treat your body with love. And for me, that means doing things that nourish my body, working out consistently, sleeping, maintaining as good of a sleep schedule as I can, you know, throughout the busyness of life, eating as well as I can, you know what I mean? Doing things that are good for my body because I respect my body and I appreciate it. So those are principles that really helped me in my recovery journey, principles that I apply basically in my everyday life. It's not things that I have to like think about to consciously apply in my everyday life, but I have done the foundational work. So now they're just things that are kind of like running in the operating system of my brain. And so in terms of where I am now with my body image journey, I would say that from when I was about 12 to when I was about like 20 were bad years for me in terms of body image. And the peak of that was like ages 18 to 20. That was like the worst, right? And so coming out of those really early years of my life into my early to mid 20s was really like where the healing work was done. And today, I can't say that I'm free of body insecurities. I still have insecurities, and I think that is really kind of a normal thing, unfortunately, in the world that we live in right now. But those insecurities are like small things. You know what I mean? I do not allow them to control me. I don't allow them to write the narrative of how I view myself and how I view my body. My self-worth is not attached to my appearance. I am deeply convicted that I am worth way more than my body, and I love and appreciate my body for what it does for me, and also as a gift from God, you know? So in terms of you and your body image healing journey, I shared a lot of tips. You know, I shared 3 principles that you can learn about, and I think the principles that I shared are in that book, More Than a Body. So those are, number 1, the fact that you are more than a body neutrality, and body respect. These principles I actually learned from that book. Yeah, so you can grab a copy, you can find it online. I highly, highly, highly recommend that book. In terms of your own mindset around your body, I think that it is okay to have body goals, right? I don't think that that's a bad thing. And I think that that's also something for myself that I have had to just like come to terms with, that it's not a bad thing to have aesthetic goals for your body. However, the problem comes when you attach worth and value to yourself because of how your body looks, right? So for me, my encouragement to you is that if you do have aesthetic goals, maybe your body is not where you want it to be, just interrogate yourself, look yourself in the mirror, figuratively, or maybe even literally if you want to do that mirror exercise that I was talking about earlier. But just look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, me not being happy with my body right now, me having a goal that I'm working towards, is that also contributing to me maybe not feeling so good about myself? And if it is, then I need to do some work to separate how I feel about myself from how I'm currently feeling about how my body looks. And then also, if you are working on reaching some sort of a body goal, I would also caution you from becoming obsessed with that goal and becoming obsessed with like your physical appearance. Because from my personal experience and just things that I've seen on social media, there is a fine line between working towards a goal with your body and also becoming obsessed with your body. So yeah, do the work, use the resources that I mentioned above, but more than that, also invite God into your healing journey. Looking back on my own journey, I can say that I did not involve God in my body image healing journey, but that was also because where I was at in my life at that time, I did not really have a relationship with God. So there was no way that I could have invited him in, but you being here today, listening to this podcast, I'm assuming that you maybe do have a relationship with God. And so if you are encouraged by this podcast to work on developing a more positive body image, invite God into that journey because God cares. God cares about every facet of our lives. And in the scriptures, in the Psalms, it says, "For you formed my innermost parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I will give thanks and praise to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well." So the word of God tells us that God was intentional with how he made us. He was intentional with how he made you. He was intentional with how he made your body. Things that you see on your body that you might perceive as flaws, God does not perceive them as flaws, right? So allow the word of God to transform you through the renewing of your mind. Allow God to really just create a new foundation for you of truth around how he sees your body, and pray to him that he would help you to internalize his truth about your body, but also even more than just about your body, about you, about your worth. You know what I mean? I feel like it can be so helpful as well to listen to what God has to say about how much he loves us, right? And if we can just internalize the love of God, perhaps we would also be able to use that love of God that we have received to also then appropriate it towards actually loving ourselves as a whole, also loving our body as part of what God made us as. So yeah, my final encouragement is also to watch your thoughts. Something that was really driving my terrible body image was the fact that my thoughts were constantly negative about myself, because I was exposing myself to things that reinforced a negative self-image and a negative body image. And then I just was not really being disciplined around what I was thinking about myself. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but then one of the things that I did start doing, this wasn't only just to heal my body image, but it was also just to heal my mental health, because I was just kind of going through a lot of crises at once. When I was like in varsity, it was a lot. But one of the things that I did was to start being disciplined around how I talk to myself and how I think, because that is where the majority of my self-talk would take place. So also, you pay attention to how you think about yourself. When you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror and you see something that you don't like, what do you say to yourself? Notice that thought, take it captive, right? Because the word of God also encourages us to take captive every thought, right? That is outside of God's truth. So also just be mindful of that and start practicing disciplining your thoughts. And this is something that I definitely have plans to speak about at length in another episode. So yeah, I hope that this is an encouragement for you. I hope that me sharing a bit of my story resonated with you, helps you not to feel alone if you are going through this. If you know somebody who maybe needs to hear this, do share it with them. and share a comment. I would love to hear like what resonated with you from this episode. What did you learn that stood out to you? You can share it on my social. You can leave a review like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the episode. And yeah, I definitely felt like I could have spoken even longer about this. Maybe I'll do another episode way down the line. But I have so much to say about this because it's something that I went through that was so difficult for me, but that I'm also so grateful for having healed from, and something that I have spoken to other women about as well in coaching sessions and stuff, and have, helped them to gain some of these tools to work on. So I know that this is a widespread issue. Like, it's not just a me thing. It's a thing that a lot of us have gone through or are going through. So I could honestly chat a lot more about this, but I'm going to leave it here. And I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I pray that it blesses you and equips you to create the change that you're looking for in your life. Stay in touch on social media. It's at Well with Jesus Podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest. And share something from today's episode on your story. Maybe it's a quote, a screenshot, or whatever it may be. I'd just love to see what's resonating with you. It'll also help the show grow and reach more women like yourself. All the resources from today's episode will be in the podcast description below, so make sure to check that out. And until next week, dear friend, stay well with Jesus.